It's the Friday edition of Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago.
And I am BC Adebayo. Welcome to the program.
Well, similar to what the U.S. Standard & Poor's 500 ranking does, where companies are ranked based on market capitalization on the New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq with a minimum capitalization of about $8.2 billion. True Nigerian Experience Limited provide Signature 50. Our Signature 50 ranks top 50 Nigerian companies based on their market capitalization on the Nigerian Stock Exchange with a minimum market capitalization of about $50 million. Now, the 2020 edition has just been released, and joining us to provide more insight into this is the Chief Executive Officer of True Nigerian Experience and the publisher Signature 50, Samson Davis. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. Davis. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Chimeze. Thanks for inviting me over.
First, let's ask you what purpose the Signature 50 is meant to achieve beyond replicating the S&P 500 model in Nigeria, and for how many years have you produced this report?
Yeah, this report started when I attended the Harvard Business School in 2018. This report started in 2018 when I attended the Harvard Business School, and we presented to the Nigerian Stock Exchange thereafter. And the idea, at that time was for us to get the market cap in terms of the viability of Nigerians' businesses. One of the questions that was put that which is the biggest bank in Nigeria by market cap, or which is the biggest telco company in Nigeria, or which is the biggest cement company in Nigeria. And to that end, we felt there was need for us to also rank Nigerian companies along with their global counterparts.
Now, looking at your list, the top 10 companies by market capitalization are cement, telecommunications, banking, and consumer goods. Now, this week, the NBS released the Q4 GDP data, and these sectors are not necessarily top on the list, neither by size nor growth performance. What does this tell us in terms of the stock market being a barometer for measuring the health of the economy?
Okay, good. If you look at the global economy, which is about $84 trillion, led by the U.S. of about $21 trillion, and followed by China with $14.5 trillion, and followed by Japan with about $5 trillion. Nigeria on that list is ranked 27th by the International Monetary Fund. Our market is totally captured in terms of the total size of the Nigerian economy to be worth $446 billion US, which is the 27th economy in the world. So today, Nigeria is bigger in terms of market size, in terms of economy, in terms of viability than hundreds of other economies in the world, starting with Argentina, starting with the 07 Emirates of the United Arab Emirates, as far as Denmark, as far as Philippines, these are economies we are far better than in several ways. So the idea is, if we're the biggest in Africa, and there are opportunities that companies, businesses have explored, and they're also successful in those ventures, we should be able to tell the world, to also consider them in terms of reference, in terms of ranking, in terms of what we have been able to do. So just in the same way you get the Forbes Global 2000, where they publish the 2,000 biggest corporations across the world. So what we have also identified Nigerian corporations, based on their market size, which is a global platform, which is a global yardstick and metric, of measuring companies in terms of size, in terms of their market value. If you talk about Saudi Aramco to be worth $2 trillion today, or you talk about JP Morgan to be worth over $400 billion today, we also have to talk about the likes of our Guarantee Trust Bank in Nigeria that is estimated of over $3 billion today. You also have to talk about Dangote Cement, for instance, that is estimated to worth $9.6 billion in the 2020 ranking. And if you look at that list, Dangote is bigger than the largest cement company in Japan. For instance, the Taiyo Cement, the owners of the Onoda Cement. Taiyo Cement is only $3 billion by market cap. And if you go as far as Indonesia, the Cement Indonesia is only worth about $6 billion, which Dangote Cement is even bigger than. You know, if you cross over to Mexico, the biggest Mexican cement company is Cemex, you know, which is, you know, worth about, you know, $6 billion. You know, same thing in Taiwan. If you cross over to Taiwan, the Taiwanese cement is about $8 billion, which the same Dangote cement in Nigeria is bigger than. So if you look at even the size of the owners of the Burj Khalifa that built Burj Khalifa in Dubai, you know, which is Emaar Properties. Emaar Properties' market valuation is $9.6 billion, which is equal the size of Dangote Cement alone.
Now, okay, tell us about the fundamental performance of the companies on the list over the last 1 year. What specifically can be said about their revenue, cost profile, and profitability? Good.
In the last 1 year, if you take the Fortune 500 standard, which talks about the biggest companies in the world by revenue, the MTN Nigeria, you know, will be the biggest. In terms of market size, MTN Nigeria is first worth about $7.7 billion, while the MTN Group of South Africa is $9.7 billion. However, the MTN Nigerian communication business is $7.7 billion on its own. Now, in the 2018 financial year, MTN alone generated in excess of 1 trillion naira, Nigerian naira, with a PAT after tax of about 145 billion naira. Despite the fines, despite the, you know, challenges and a few other things, the company was still able to surmount all of that. Now, if you look at Dangote Cement, in 2018, for instance, they declared a 901 billion naira gross revenue, you know, which is about $4 billion, you know, at that time. And they declared a profitability of 390 billion naira at that time, which is about $1.3 billion. Now, a few days ago, Dangote Cement released their 2019 results. You know, as you are well aware, the company came up with about 890 billion naira Nigerian currency as their gross revenue and declared about 200 billion naira profitability. Even with that profitability, Dangote Cement still grossed over $600 million in terms of profitability for the 2019 financial year. You know, MTN is yet to release their financial, MTN Nigeria, I mean, they are yet to release their financial for 2019. But as at the 9-month financials of MTN had surpassed in excess of 900 billion in gross revenue. So I wouldn't expect anything less than what they have declared in the last 1 year, you know, in 2019. Now, Zenith Bank is estimated to be worth about $2.2 billion, you know, by market cap. Now, if you look at their 2019 result that was also released not too long ago, you know, gave us an overview of 682 billion naira Nigerian currency, you know, which is almost about the same size of their market cap of about $2.2 billion. You know, even at that, they are still able to declare a profitability in excess of 200 billion naira, you know, which means right now, Zenith Bank is able to declare profit of over 600 billion naira, bigger than that of Deutsche Bank, you know, in 2018. And even as I speak, I'm quite sure Deutsche Bank, which is the largest bank in Germany, is still running at a loss. So in terms of profitability, our companies are doing quite well. If you look at Seplat, for instance, in 2019, for instance, they've not declared their 2019 result, but as at the 9-month result of Seplat, Seplat had declared $184 million, you know, in terms of profit, you know, after tax. So these are companies that are doing way better than even Saipem of Italy. You know, even the market cap of Seplat alone is pegged at $1.1 billion, which is bigger than Apple Green of the Republic of Ireland in terms of market size.
Mr. Davis, does your ranking take into cognizance some of the sharp changes that may occur on the exchange from time to time? For instance, now, this time in 2019, MTN and even Airtel Africa were not listed, and Bois Cement was equally not on the list. But today, these three stocks make the top 5 most capitalized list.
Yes. Bois Cement went for a consolidation. You know, Bois Cement had interest in Obu Cement, had interest in Cement Company of Northern Nigeria, had cement in Northern Cement Company. So all of these, you know, entities were merged into one entity that gave rise to Bois Cement, imagine, as the third biggest company in Nigeria, with a market cap of $4.5 billion. Now, if you look at that list, even Bois Cement is bigger than the largest cement company in Japan today, which is another cement owned by Taio Cement Company. So in terms of that size, we've also seen that from revenue point, the likes of MTN that dominate our services sector in Nigeria, are running at par with the Dangote Cement, And in no time, if you look at the market cap of the entire MTN group, of South Africa, which is $9.7 billion, if Nigeria's MTN is now worth $7.7 billion, it means in no time, MTN may surpass even MTN Nigeria may surpass MTN of South Africa. So what that tells us is that while the revenues of the service sector, is growing in Nigeria and globally, because the service sector, even in the United States, dominated by 80% of their economy, rather than the manufacturing sector. So what this tells us is the world is looking in the attention of service, in the area of service, and a lot of revenues, a lot of patronage, are globally expected in that regard.
Now, if you are to classify the companies ranked into specific sectors, which sectors would you say are mostly favored? And are there sectors that are possibly not represented at all on the list? What does this say about future listing on the bourse?
Yeah, what the listing of MTN and Airtel has, said to everybody basically is the world will not recognize you, from Nigeria if you are not listed, on the stock exchange, for an example, because there won't be any yardstick to measure your performance. There won't be any yardstick to measure your, how you are being regulated. Now, in 2018, for instance, where we did this ranking, Dangote Cement was the biggest company, still the biggest company in 2019, followed by Nestle Nigeria, and then followed by GTB as the third biggest company in Nigeria at that time. From the moment the likes of MTN came on board, MTN was running neck to neck. That's MTN Nigeria, running neck to neck with the market cap of Dangote Cement. But Dangote Cement has been able to weather all of that challenges, and still be able to dominate that market. Now, if you look at the valuation achieved by MTN Nigeria, in the tune of $7.7 billion, and the valuation achieved by Airtel Africa, domiciled in Nigeria majorly, to the tune of $4.5 billion. That tells you $3.7 billion, sorry, for Airtel Africa. That tells you that the potentials of even Nine Mobile has not been discovered until they are listed in terms of market size. The potentials of Nigeria's Globalcom has not been could not be known at the moment because of market size, because they are not listed. So that also gives an idea, an overview, that when some of these companies are listed or come to the fore in terms of being globally recognized, via the Nigerian Stock Exchange, that means there is a possibility, for more companies, to get on that list and even surpass, the dominant players for years.
But I'm sure you know that there are big companies operating in the country that are possibly not listed at all or that are trading on the NASD platform. Do you think your study in the future should take account of these companies? For instance, if Friesland Wamco was listed on the NSE today, it will probably make the list, but it's trading actively on the NASD platform. Now, shouldn't your study extend to the NASD as well?
Well, while I agree with you in terms of looking at the over-the-counter market in terms of other platforms, this is the second edition we're looking at. And the idea right now is to look at what is the attention the world is looking at in terms of market size. If you look at the Standard & Poor's 500, it is strictly based on your market capitalization on the New York Stock Exchange. At some other point, they added the NASDAQ. So we would also get there where we begin to consider companies that are not listed on the capital market in terms of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. But at the moment, there's a lot of attention, on, companies that are globally listed on the exchange, on the primary exchange of their country. If you look at Saudi Arabia can tell you today they're the biggest beneficiary of Aramco without listing on Tadawul of Saudi Arabia, or let's say JP Morgan can claim to be the biggest, in America in terms of bank, without being listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So the idea would be for us to identify, among the core players, that are, currently listed in the world. It is a global knowledge that a company that is not publicly listed, where documents are not publicly verified, may not even be acknowledged in any form. because anybody can come up with any figure. So what the world is also asking is, before we are judged that you are the biggest in certain area or you are the biggest in certain sector, you must have been publicly listed, you must be owned by the public, your accounts must be verifiable by the public, you must have gone through a couple of routines, exercise. There are sanctions, that also come from listing on any country's stock exchange. So maybe these are some of the conditions that the likes of Standard & Poor's have set up, also put in place, that we are also following.
Okay, looking at your list now, we saw that almost all the banking stocks featured in your ranking, but only about 3 insurance stocks made the list. What do you think this says about that sector within the financial services space?
Yeah. The insurance players, mostly, the reforms Nigeria have witnessed since 2005, when we had our last banking consolidation, much of that impact has not been felt in the insurance sector. So you have a lot of the players that are doing quite well in terms of premium income generation, but are not listed. From the list you have with you would see the likes of Custodian Investment, the owners of Custodian Insurance, as the biggest. You also see the likes of NEM Insurance. You also see the AXA Mansard as well, as, those that are publicly listed. We have others that are also listed, but may not have been able to surmount enough market listing, to make the list. Now, what is also expected is to get on that list, there's a benchmark. We have a lot of players in the insurance industry today that may also need to be, consolidated. I'm aware there's some announcement in that industry for the players to consolidate, for the players to improve in terms of their capital, in terms of their capitalization figure, because the last was done some years ago. So to get a lot of those players, there's need for some kind of coalition, some kind of mergers and acquisitions like we witnessed in the banks before. Nigeria used to have about 90 banks. Now we have less than 20 or thereabout. So for the insurance sector to also get to that area, there is also need for them to look into, what is the capital base. The world is talking about your size. The world is talking about your finances in terms of what have you been able to generate. I know quite well some insurance companies that are supposed to be listed. An example is Leadway. Leadway is doing quite well in terms of gross premium income. I'm aware they generate in excess of 120 billion naira, in terms of premium income. However, Leadway is not listed. So we are not going to recognize Leadway in terms of ranking until Leadway is listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, for an example.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davies, for speaking with us on Business Morning today. Mr. Davies is the Chief Executive Officer of the True Nigerian Experience and the publisher Signature 50, Samson Davies, actually.